Let's see if this is working. Maybe. Might be working. Maybe. It says we're live. Are we actually live? Let's find out.
I don't... Oh, there we are.
It says... It says we are.
If you're watching, hello.
Huh.
You're experiencing a momentary technical hiccup, which should be resolved momentarily.
Shh. I'm... No, not now. Let's do it this way. That page has been giving trouble lately. Huh. It's almost like it's just freezing randomly. That's not good. Yeah. Huh. One moment! Let's hope for just a hiccup.
Hiccup! Hiccup!
Alright, I think it's... I mean, it's probably working. I have no idea why it wouldn't. You know what? Let's roll with it. I'll make a local recording too, just in case.
Here we are.
Alright, so this is Composer Talk, week 2. Possibly with a technical difficulty, but we'll find out. So this week, you know, I'm Zach, this is Jacob. We're back. We've got some more stuff to chat about and complain about, you know, depends what we're feeling. And again, Composer Talk is just kind of we're trying to open a dialogue. We're trying to get people to talk about new music, especially amongst composers, because, well, there's a lot to talk about, and we're also just trying to consolidate kind of the ether of compositional knowledge. At least a little bit. Huh. So, up first, you want to take the first one?
Yes, we have Macarthur Fellowship organization just announced their 2017 fellows. And among them, for those of you in the audience who may not be familiar with the organization, the Macarthur Fellowship awards 5-year fellowships every year to, I think, in between 20 and 30 individuals who have demonstrated exceptional creativity, which in their definition could be anything from creativity in the arts to the sciences. We have social justice advocates on there. We have, I think, an immunologist this year. But among the people who they award fellowships to are composers and musicians. This year, the composer Taishan Sori has been awarded a Macarthur Fellowship. Sori is a composer whose works span multiple genres. He's kind of active in the classical world, but his music is infused with jazz, Eastern influences, lots of improvisation, as I've managed to gather. I'm not personally familiar with his music, but we'll have to get familiar with his music because it sounds like something I would like.
It seems that way. I didn't get to listen to much of it. I'm also running technical difficulty. There we go. Yeah, see, it is.
Are we on?
Yeah, we are. It's just YouTube Gaming is throwing a fit right now. I was trying YouTube Gaming because I like the background better. My bad. Anyways, but, yeah, I mean, the music is interesting, and it's kind of the stuff that I seem to do whenever I write percussive music, especially, because I take kind of a more classical approach, but I infuse it with kind of just that rhythm. Like, I mean, if you want to call it that, like, just infusing it with something of more of a pop element is something that it just kind of creates an earworm for people, you know, and it seems like someone that I should get to know better, and, you know, I unfortunately don't know this composer, so, you know, I'll be better about knowing my contemporary composers.
Well, over the next 5 years, he will be receiving over $600,000 as a stipend to go towards his work, so hopefully he should have plenty of resources to get his music out there to people like us.
There you go. Alright, so, next, I'm actually going to skip that one. I'm going to go... No, I'll do that one. So, Michael Tilson Thomas, a longtime conductor, 25 years, I believe, of the San Francisco Symphony, is stepping down in 2020. He's kind of been there for a while. And basically anyone who holds a tenure of more than a decade with an orchestra, it's pretty good. And because not only can you say, oh, I've been with the orchestra, oh, I've created my artistic mission here, but you also go so far as to say, hey, I have cultivated this community. Like, we're sending off a conductor here in Oklahoma City. He's been here for better part of 20 years, I want to say.
Something like that.
Something like that. But, yeah, I mean, it's always sad to see these on-time conductors go, but, I really hope he does do some, I guess, passion projects.
Well, he won't be gone permanently. He's essentially, from what I've read, going into semi-retirement. He will stay on with the orchestra, as I believe his title will be Music Director Laureate, and conduct a few concerts a year, stay involved, but not be as involved in, of course, the day-to-day grind of having to conduct a major orchestra. So he's essentially going to be, the emeritus conductor, in that regard. So yes, he is over 70 years old. This is, from what I understand, retirement as opposed to. I'm sure he will take on other projects, but as opposed to leaving to conduct another orchestra, he's in that part of his career.
Well, we're kind of reaching that point where a lot of these mainstay conductors for major and non-major orchestras alike are starting to kind of step down, because we kind of placed a lot of conductors in the 80s, and it's because, well, we had a previous wave die, and it kind of happens. Well, we've kind of just had waves of this stuff. It's kind of like the world of composition. I mean,
in St. Louis, where I'm from, another one of the best orchestras in the world, their music director David Robertson is stepping. I don't know when he's stepping down. I know he announced it at some point last year.
I think it's in the next couple of years, if I remember, because I remember reading that. It's relatively soon. It's not quite as far off as this one, but
and I'm not sure if he's going into retirement or taking on a new project. I haven't read into it that much.
Well, and he doesn't have as many of the like, I'll just call them the gold standard like recordings that a lot of conductors can brag about.
Right.
But that conductor in particular, I've enjoyed watching him conduct, because I've gone up to St. Louis occasionally, because I'm from Southern Missouri. I like going to the symphony there occasionally, and the best show I saw was actually with a group of people from my undergraduate. We went up to see Symphonie Fantastique my junior year, and he gave probably one of the best performances of that I can recall.
Oh yeah, I think I saw them do that same piece. I think it was a couple years later, and it was just, well, fantastique.
No. You want to take the next topic as penance for your terrible joke?
But David Robertson, and also a new music friendly conductor, very very involved in putting John Adams' work out there, which I've appreciated as a big John Adams fan myself. But going on to our next topic, Musical America, which is a mainstay in the classical music world. I believe it's America's longest running classical music magazine. Now has gone to an online format predominantly, but they've announced every year they announce awards for classical music. I think there are 5 categories that are awarded, and this year Mason Bates is the composer of the year. For those of you who may not know Mason Bates, this is another composer I'm not extremely familiar with. I know 1 or 2 of his pieces. His piece called Mothership is kind of his, I guess, his big hit.
Right now, it's kind of one of his big hits.
It's performed rather frequently. He also recently wrote his first opera, which is called The Revolution of Steve Jobs. So kind of following in the cinematic trend that we've got in the last 5 years, following Steve Jobs' death, of making movies about his life. He decided to write an opera, and I'm not sure who did the libretto for that, but
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Right, I haven't seen the opera. But...
Well, as far as his writing goes, I mean, it definitely catches the public eye. For me, I think he's kind of done what a lot of us seek to do, and that is find a way to basically gain popular interest, because even people that, because it's been done a couple times here already. And one of the audience members who had never been really to a classical concert that they had liked, or more classical because it's a wind band, so I guess more reserved in that case. But they walked away really loving it. This is one of our music appreciation students we have here on campus, and he loved it. He's kind of not really into the music as a whole, but he liked the piece. And overall, I think the piece is different enough that it can appeal to those type of people. So, I don't know. I think he's onto something, and I think it. I'm kind of excited to see what he can do now. Because as you know, once you gain a title, you can gain more work, more commissions, etc.
Right.
And it's a really good thing, and more power to him.
I'm particularly interested in listening to the opera. I think I only know Mothership off the top of my head, so trying to.
I think that's one of the pieces that helped.
Which doesn't really make me familiar with the composer. It would be like judging Kansas by Carry On Wayward Son or something like that.
I thought you meant the state Kansas for a second. I mean, what are you going to say?
I mean the band. Great band, by the way. Kansas, fantastic. But
go over there. Great bass line in that piece, though. Anyways, so this week we want to talk about a few things. Now we're kind of out of the news section. Opening up, we kind of want to talk a bit about kind of composers with criticism and feedback, particularly amongst their cohorts. Now, this is something that I'm pretty big into, because I think constructive criticism from your peers is one of the most, if not the most important thing you can get in your compositional careers, especially early on. And I've even gone so far as I'm a system builder, and I'm trying to get people to share music, give criticism, just amongst other composers that are hanging out with us. And a big part of that, in my opinion at least, is being able to give good critical feedback. Not necessarily, oh, your music isn't bad, I like it type thing, because that doesn't tell anybody anything. If you just tell them, Jacob, I think your string quartet is good, what did he learn from that? Or
conversely, it sucks.
Or, yeah, like,
right.
You didn't tell them anything, and plus if you tell your friend that his music sucks, he's probably not going to send it to you anymore. Like, I mean, and honestly, they won't get the feedback, so kind of what is the balance there? I mean, what do you think?
I think one thing that I have begun to think about as a composer, and we're both currently students, but getting started and entering into the professional world, what is the balance, not just of critiquing the works of your immediate friends and colleagues where you're at, but of composers in general. I mean, with the internet and the ability to disseminate your opinions anywhere, everywhere, all the time, it's very easy to say whatever you want, and however that could have a negative effect on your professional career. Because if I for example, I don't know, let's say I go on record on my Facebook page as bashing some composer who teaches in...
Let's just say you're bashing me.
Right. Well, I was more thinking if I bash some composer who teaches at, I don't know, a school in, like, New York, like Eastman or something, and then I audition there...
for my doctorate.
Right. Yeah. And of course these are somewhat different issues. The feedback we give in our immediate circles and those we give...
For now, let's keep it restricted within the peer.
I mean, I do think they're related to an extent. I think my approach tends to be, don't say anything about someone else's music to a third party that you wouldn't say to that person's face.
I can agree to that. I mean, because even with that, even if you genuinely, and this is where the challenge comes in, I think, like, even if you have a piece that is genuinely, because, I mean, we've all been to concerts where there's just a piece where you walk away and it's like, what was that? Like, come on, man. So, even walking away from a concert like that, you should be, and I think it's a challenge, and I think it's a good, I think it's a good constructive effort, and it's good for your development to find something in that piece that you genuinely couldn't say you liked, but say, I liked this element. And I think that finding that one element actually helps develop you as a composer.
Right. And when giving feedback, this is kind of a tried and true technique. But to me, whether you're talking to someone else about a third party's music or whether you're giving that person direct feedback, the best way to handle from the criticizer's end, the best way to handle criticism is say something you like about it, and then give constructive criticism, because immediately, you know, if your first reaction is I liked this element, that is automatically going to put that person at ease somewhat. They know you're not just talking to them to bash their piece. You're
I had to redo my notes about your last piece then. Okay.
but it shows that you've actually taken the care to find something, even if it's a piece you don't like, that you can appreciate. And I think ultimately, no matter, even if there's a piece that just isn't good at all, there's pretty much always something there.
Well, kind of related to this is, like, for instance, you know, you've written a guitar sonata recently.
Right.
I'm not a big fan of guitar. It's not that I think it's like inferior. I don't think it's there are some people that think it's just like the pedestrian instrument. I'm not in that crowd. I don't appreciate the timbre of it, which you think I'm weird for.
I think you're silly.
Well, we all have our silly things. So, but I'm able to look past that, and I don't think I would have been able to do this 3 or 4 years ago. But I am able to look past the fact that I'm not a big fan of guitar. And I'm able to subjectively in my case, tell him, you know what? I like what you've done with the music. And, you know, because we've talked about your guitar sonata to a fair extent. And, you know, there are parts of it that I've given you feedback of, yeah, you should do this more. And then other things, you know, again, looking past the guitar, like, man, you know, why did you do that? Like, there was an engraving thing that, you know, me and my current professor were kind of at ends with what he should do on some engraving that he did. But that's not even a compositional issue. That's just relevant to the whole field, because, I mean, everybody's qualified, and it's just like, you know, you just take all your opinions and you distill it and figure out what you want to do. But, you know, I think it's really important, and I think that it's something that you learn, because, you know, in my undergraduate, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that. I probably would have just been like, oh, guitar! But I'm able to look past it now, and, you know, I feel good about it, and especially because, you know, you can look at it, and I can objectively tell you, I'm not a fan of guitar, but... You know, my feedback, I hope, was at least somewhat constructive, and I hope will reflect in your compositional output at some point. But, you know, if it doesn't, who cares?
I think just in general, being able to admit your own biases in giving feedback. I do the same thing. I do the same thing when I look at your music or anyone else's. I am aware that we agree on a lot, but there are fundamental differences between my compositional philosophy and your compositional philosophy, and really between pretty much me and anyone else. Same goes for any composer. And at some point, your criticism has to acknowledge that you approach anything you look at with a bias, and that your perspective is not the only valid one. Which is why when I look at a piece, I will give criticism, but I'm not going to be, I don't know what the right, I don't know, insistent might be the right word about it. If somebody doesn't accept my criticism, then they don't accept my criticism, or not even don't accept but don't agree with it. It's not the end of the world if somebody disagrees with you about their piece or about any other.
I don't know, man. I'm always right. No, I was kidding. No, and I think that's important. Like, for instance, you know, there's a colleague of mine, somewhat recently that, I mean, this is kind of a slightly different situation, but I feel it's related, so I'll just call this a tangent. But I was actually giving feedback and just saying, you know, I feel like this should be maybe notated this way, because it's just, it's a little, I guess, it's more difficult than it needs to be, is how it came down to. And this person kind of just rejected it entirely until a second party said it too. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's a great idea. So it's situations like that where it's like, you know, I think that person really didn't want the feedback, and it's only the numbers that really added up to him. Because at that point it was the 2 pieces of feedback that person received. Then it was like, you know what? Maybe this is something, and you know, there's something to be said about sticking to your guns, but whenever people are just as qualified, or in some cases more qualified than you, and they give you a piece of feedback, whether it be positive or negative, you should always take it at least into consideration. I mean, don't throw it out the window instantly. I always take, even though, you know, I have masterclass composers sometimes that I have not agreed with, and I will kind of just sit there and I'll be like, you know what? What if?
Mm-hmm.
What if this person's right? Because honestly, all these guest artists that are coming in, they're more qualified than me. I mean, why wouldn't I at least think about what they have to say?
Right. And of course, some people's... You'll probably give some people's feedback a little more weight than others. For example, what your teacher says... To me, what my teacher says is going... I'm going to think longer and harder about that than what a colleague says or a fellow
because it's a dual
student.
agenda. Because yes,
Right.
he's also a composer just like the rest of us, but he's also he's kind of got your degree in front of you like
well,
this. So
well, and not even that you have to agree with your teacher on everything. I mean, a good teacher, you know, and our teacher has said this to me, and I'm sure he said it to you. It's your piece. Ultimately, it's up to the composer what you do.
Yeah, sometimes I don't even get that much.
but I think what I'm trying to say is that I agree with you. You'll probably give some people's criticism more weight than others. If just a random guy off the street says something about my music, I do want to take it into consideration, but it's not going to have the same...
for a couple seconds.
It's not going to have the same weight as something a guest composer coming into the university or my teacher might say would. But to me, there's something also valuable about a random guy off the street's opinion. And the way they perceive the music. So like, I agree with you. Everything into consideration. Nothing is completely authoritative, but all things should be considered.
Fair enough.
Yes.
So, I mean, and this leads us kind of, not really dovetailing, but it kind of brings us a little bit into the next topic, but, you know, friendly competition. And that's a huge part whenever, or I guess criticism is kind of a huge part of this. Because, like, for instance, you know, I have a really good colleague of mine that I have lots of friendly competition with is, you know, Kyle Vanderberg. He is a wonderful composer of, you know, electronic and acoustic music, all very well crafted. And we kind of get into fun little contests sometimes, just like, hey, you know, I wrote this many notes, or hey, you know, I wrote this much music, or even things like, you know, we both wrote garbage pieces at the same time. I mean, just literally garbage sounds, not like bad music. Try to insult the piece, I dare you. Anyways, but we both wrote this at the same time, and it's a nice kind of sense of friendly competition. And you know, I just had another instance of this yesterday where myself and a couple of other grad students were in an electronic music sequence, and we all had to write a 1-minute miniature using granular synthesis on a single tam-tam hit. We got 3 completely different pieces, and our professor gave us 3 completely different sets of feedback. And like, for instance, the other 2 had form, mine did not. Mine had kind of more dynamic contrast. Theirs was more, you know, one way or the other, you know, etc. Like, everybody's had their strengths and weaknesses, and it kind of at that point was a point of friendly or at least collegial competition, because it's like, you know, what are you going to do, especially when it's the same materials? Just like, you know, we had, very recently, we had a composer's concert here where 2 people wrote saxophone pieces. Saxophone quartets. In fact, they shared a quartet, which honestly, bravo. More people should be doing that. Share ensembles whenever you can. But, you know, they should look at that as a point of friendly competition, in my opinion, because it only serves to further, as long as it's healthy competition. Now, if it's like cutthroat, like, oh no, I'm gonna like burn this page of your score so that I mean, we don't do physical. You know what you mean, though.
Right. I think there's a caveat there that you think very competitively. I tend to think to a degree competitively as well, but I wouldn't go as far as to say that friendly competition is a must.
I don't think it's a must. I just think it's good.
It can be good. Some people simply do not work competitively, and there are others who, because of their personality or maturity level, may not be ready to take on friendly competition because it will not stay friendly.
I can think of a couple of our younger cohorts that might fit that.
But and that's it has to do with age, it has to do with personality.
Honestly, I think it's mostly experience.
Yes. And I mean, as you experience, because as you progress in the field, you learn very quickly that you can't be self-conscious about criticism, and that you can't be too self-conscious about your work, because you will fall apart if you can't come at things with a thick skin. To me the key to keeping it friendly is, this is a little bit of an esoteric way of saying it, but is to keep it on a small scale. To me, there is a difference between competing with a specific work, like two people writing for the same ensemble, or competing in the sense that, oh, this person did this thing really well in their piece, I want to, either imitate that or see what I can add to it. It's another matter entirely to be endlessly focused on, am I better than this person, or is this person better than me? And it can sometimes be, there's definitely a distinction there, but in practice it can be a very subtle distinction. And I find, in my thought, that I always have to police myself, from comparing my music with others, not in the sense of, like I said before, the small scale, but the large scale. Wanting to think, oh, I'm better than this person, or oh, I'm not as good as this person, I must be terrible. Because ultimately both of those approaches, they come from kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, but both are prideful and arrogant ultimately. It's focusing too much on your perception of yourself and on others' perceptions of you, and not enough on the music. To me, ultimately the key is that it's not about you, it's about the music. And if you are keeping your focus on the music and not on yourself, then that feeds healthy competition.
And I agree. And, like my examples, for instance, one of my colleagues here, Angel, he and I, we have these little things. I mean, obviously we both wrote that Tam Tam piece at the same time. Mm-hmm. But in general, we work just in different fields in general. I mean, he focuses, because we both do both electronic and acoustic, but he focuses heavy on electronic. I focus heavily on acoustic, and for some reason lately on weird improvisational based music, because I guess I'm bored or something, I don't know. But, I think it is important, because, if we were to, let's just say, for instance, you felt the need to get into a competition with me. And it was obvious, you were writing a tape piece, you were starting to do a couple of improv pieces, you were trying to do more string quartets, things like that, just kind of, copying my, I guess, my preferred output. And you're trying to get competitive about everything. At that point, it becomes extremely unhealthy.
Well, and there's the balance to be had of, I think competition has to evolve organically. If somebody's just trying to imitate what somebody else is trying to do,
that's very different.
And there's also just the matter of, I might work competitively with you in the sense of if we're both writing a quartet or something like this.
I don't think we've ever written something at the same time, actually.
I mean, we're both kind of doing quasi-minimalist stuff right now. It's different enough that
they're for starkly different things.
Right.
So I'm going very, I'll just call it classical minimalism with writing. It's actually 2 or 3 pieces at the same time because I'm suicidal like that. And yours seems to be much more the Adams-esque minimalism.
It's more in the, I know you hate this word, but the post-minimalistic idiom.
Post anything is not a term. That's a topic for next week.
We post talk about that.
Post blank.
But
that'll be the name of the video. Post blank.
and if that competition arises organically, that's a good thing. It would be another matter entirely for me to try to compete with either yours or one of our colleagues who writes electronic music, because at that point, it's
out of left field for you.
It's going to be, well, if I'm doing it in the context of, I'm going to write an electronic piece, I shouldn't be focused on competing with anybody. Because I have not done that before, I should be focused on just getting started. And if I'm doing it in the context of trying to use my acoustic music to compete with an electronic composer's music,
Doesn't make sense.
then it simply makes no sense. Right.
Now here's the question though. What if there's overlap? So for instance, what if, because I just had the premiere of Nocturne for Dice, coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, no, I did already post that. But so Nocturne for Dice, that's acoustic, electronic, and improvisational. In this particular instance, it was kind of a little bit of all of it. I would say mostly just acoustic and improvisational, though, based on the structure of it. Do you feel that, like, for instance, your string quartet is in competition with that at all? They both have acoustic elements. I mean, yours is acoustic and mine has acoustic elements. Like, are
honestly
because
no?
there's
Like,
overlap.
I don't see. There's some, but honestly, it's not. To me, it's not just a matter of there being elements that overlap. They're completely different pieces.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing there that is even, I mean, worth comparing in the sense of quality. I mean, I honestly don't see the point in trying to compare pieces like that. And to me, it's a matter of, if you're competing with someone self-consciously, and it's okay to be conscious of it, but if you're self-consciously trying to compete with somebody, it might be a sign that you might not be going in the right direction. If
Right.
it doesn't arise organically, and especially if it's something that you both aren't in on.
I could agree to that. I think it's both ways, but let us know. Kind of where is that line between healthy and non-healthy competition? Should me and Jacob get into a competition?
I mean,
It'll be great.
again, at this point, it would be the self-conscious kind of contest. Although I think we're both mature enough to handle a little friendly contest.
Yeah. But then again, honestly, like, we'd also run to the point of I'd probably just, like, finish the piece, then get bored and work on something else, because we write at different paces. Then I'd probably just forget we were doing it. So
it could be the competition, like, what can I say in 2 minutes what Zach can say in 10? I don't know. It could be an overnight piece kind of thing.
I actually, sidebar, this is another tangent before we move on, but so have you seen Cutthroat Kitchen?
No, I know what it is though.
Okay.
Have I? Maybe I have seen it. I don't know.
What would you say to something like that, or Chopped, but for composition?
See, okay, I don't
want to go too in depth on this, but like, just out of like, is there interest from you on that?
On one level, it would be fun. On another level, first of all, it might be kind of hard to market. Second of all,
what if I told you it's actually happened here at OU before?
Are we talking about like actually doing a TV show, or just like an event that we
all night event in Pittman / the choir room?
See, to me that's fun. That's a cool thing to do. When you first said that, my thought is,
oh no, we're not doing a TV. No, right. We're not making a reality.
But not even
show.
Like a reality show. Like like a public competition. There's a perspective and there's something to be said for the idea that music really shouldn't be as competitive as we try to make it. And putting it on a public level like that, where it's not just friendly competition among colleagues.
Again, that's not what it would be. It would be more just like, it would be like the composers, the other people who are just interested that just kind of want to see, and then an ensemble of choosing.
But like a cool event, yeah, sure.
A cool, yeah. Anyways, I've actually talked with Dr. Vandenberg actually about this, and this is something I kind of want to do because it happened once, and I kind of want to make it happen again. But right now I'm too busy inventing other things and doing stuff.
Well, and this kind of brings us to our next planned topic
Composer
we had today.
concerts!
Right. Collaborations between composers to get their music performed.
And even if they're kind of pre-programmed, like most universities have some sort of, most universities with a composition program have some sort of like composing concert, all that stuff. Here, I've recently been branding it as Composing Tomorrow. I'm really bad with titling things.
That title kind of takes into account how most of us I'll do it tomorrow.
That wasn't intentional. I meant it for we're composing the music.
Procrastination fuels creativity sometimes.
Other times it drives madness. But anyways, so with composer concerts in general, I mean, I don't know. Do you? Because keep in mind, back in the day, like if you look at the Boston Six, even Lee Six, if you look at, basically any time in history when there was a group of composers in a city, especially a major city. I mean, we're in a major city, Oklahoma City. Why can't there be a group of composers that puts on concerts outside the academic environment? Because the academic environment, yeah, you get it, and honestly, ours has been gaining more and more traction lately, but. There should be something that's more of a public thing. Like, why can't we put on a concert in North OKC? Or East OKC, right. Sorry. I don't want to go to North OKC.
And I think part of this is trying to break out of that academic bubble that so many composers get into. If we think about how back in the olden days, music was disseminated, you look at people, and look back to early 19th century Vienna. Beethoven, Schubert, composers like that weren't just sitting around waiting for somebody.
However, they didn't collectively put on concerts.
Right.
So that I wouldn't really group in this. I would think more like the Boston.
Well, I'm thinking of it more analogous in the sense of trying to get out of the academic bubble. And of course, I think in this day and age, that's something that is best done collaboratively. But I don't think it's a bad parallel to draw.
I don't think it's bad, except they basically had the equivalent of what would today be a corporate sponsor, and I mean, realistically, that's not going to happen. So I think what needs to happen.
That's why we collaborate. This is why I'm feeding.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I can see the connection now.
But to me, I was more going off the idea. Less focusing on the collaboration, which becomes an element, and more focusing on the idea of getting out of that academic bubble and using each other's resources and helping each other do that is one of the places where the collaboration comes in.
Okay, well, yeah. I mean, sorry, I'm trying to think about this. I mean, as far as collaborative concerts, I mean, I'm trying to start something similar around here. It's kind of slow going, but it's something that should happen, and it's something that I'm all for. But again, part of me is also like, well, if there's only one standard bearer, so to say, what happens when that standard bearer leaves?
Well,
in general, I'm talking 100% in general. I'm not saying, oh, there's a little me that is going to be here that will take my place if I, graduate and get a job somewhere. But, like, what happens if I build up this composer concert series as the standard bearer, and I'm doing that also for, keep in mind, all the OU composition stuff. I'm doing it for at least 3 layers there, the workshop, all this. What if that were to, what if that person in any situation, whether it be here, Boston, a guy like that, and okay, New York City, there's probably plenty of them, but you get the idea. What happens?
I think ultimately, it's a matter of not being the standard bearer. I think if you want something to last, and you have an idea, and you want it to continue after you leave, then you have to not make the idea about you. You have to make it about the idea, and that means to me, even if you have the idea, in inviting people into that. This is where we talk about it as a collaboration. I think it has to be a collaboration not merely on the front end but on the back end.
And I agree, but what do you do because there have been situations like this in the past where you don't have any real willingness to do it. You have a bunch, basically, here, let's just say this. Let's say it's a group of friends, and you all go out to eat every Sunday afternoon.
Right.
It's just a thing you do. And nobody can ever make a decision. So Tim always ends up having to make the decision because he, invited everybody in the first place.
Right.
And he just picks the place every time. After so long, are people even going to try to decide, or are they just going to get in the car and say, Tim, where are we going?
Right.
Does that kind of relay a bit more what I'm
and I
worried
mean,
about?
at that point, if nobody else is willing to take any kind of initiative, then you simply don't have a...
You don't go to eat anymore.
Well, you just don't have a stable group of people. And ultimately, if Tim wanted to get all these people together to eat, and he wanted them to continue to get together to eat after he leaves, then he should be going to eat with people who have the guts to make a decision. I think ultimately, these things, yeah, and I know you've been active in trying to get composers to collaborate and trying to get that thing started, but ultimately, it's kind of like I was talking about competition. There has to be an element of organicism to it. If it's one person calling all the shots, whether it's an official capacity or just kind of a de facto leader, then when that person leaves, there's a good chance it's going to dissolve.
Right.
So ultimately, I think the solution is that don't let that happen. And if that does happen, if some person is becoming the de facto leader, either somebody has to step up and take initiative and get other people to take initiative also, or it's simply not going to be a stable group. And
right now, conversely, what if, now we're going to flip back to the music side now that we've kind of simplified it down to the going out to eat. Let's recomplicate it, add in music. Let's just say, for instance, let's just say I moved to, I don't know, Springfield, Missouri, my hometown. And for some reason, it has a lot of composers that are actually working. And I'm there because I've got a full-time job as faculty.
Right.
I'm pretty much there to stay. Is there actually a problem at that point with having the standard bearer, if that standard bearer is a mainstay?
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Because at that point, I feel it adds longevity.
I don't know that there's a problem. I'd rather be in a group that was more collaborative and not focused around a single personality.
Well, no, not focused. No, I'm not saying focused on personality at all. I'm literally just talking, like, we'll just use the name Tim again. Tim eats and composes music now. He's moving up in life.
Right.
Tim is just the guy who makes all the cold calls. Tim is just the guy who, has people over at his apartment type thing.
Right.
That kind of thing. Not necessarily, it's the all about, Tim or all about Zach or all about Jacob show. It's just,
right.
I made the cold call, I reserved the hall type thing. Like, that's it. Because, at that point, you are kind of the unofficial standard bearer.
See, as I said, I don't think there's a problem with that.
Okay.
Personally, as a composer, I'd rather work in a more collaborative group.
Which is something that is the most preferred way.
Because ultimately, I don't want somebody telling me what to do. Like, I'm going to do whatever I want. So, and in that case, if you get, another strong personality in the group, you can have clashes. If somebody has become some sort of the default leader and somebody else isn't so thrilled with all the decisions. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I just think that the most stable way, the way I would prefer to work, is where everybody kind of works together,
well, everybody
equally.
Just again, but it seems that we agree on that. But again, talking in a just kind of in a simplified way, can you answer, if you move to, let's just say, I don't know, Chicago, and there's a group of composers that likes you and invites you in, and you find out that, Tim kind of just is in charge, but it really isn't about him. In fact, he frequently programs concerts that have none of his music.
Right.
do you have a problem being part of that group?
Do I have an inherent problem? No. Could problems arise? Yes.
I think problems could arise if, for instance, and thank for that. I think problems could arise if Tim, for instance, like let's just say you recommend to Tim, or actually no, let's just remove Tim. Let's just say it's here. Let's just say I've got a group of composers. We're doing something, and you recommend something.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say you recommend, no, instead of doing the event at a church, why don't we try and do it at a high school?
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a weird decision, but that's the decision you decide to propose. If I instantly just look at you and say, Jacob, you're stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a bad person for that.
And I mean,
but if I actually listen to you and say, yeah, you know what, that's a good idea. I think that is a good leader.
And I think there's also distinction between somebody who leads and somebody who makes decisions. You can have somebody leading and the group making decisions together.
Yes, and I think that is. And again, I think, and this is something that with because I've got a lot of leadership experience from various walks of life. I personally feel that leadership is both the ability to delineate. I think it's a huge part of it is delineating. Okay, this amount of work, it has to be spread between everyone because it's an important decision, or it's a group process, and then part of it is also kind of, unfortunately, sometimes being the villain, so to speak, and making a decision that might not be popular, but has the best result long term for everyone involved. Which I've done that occasionally, and it does work. And I personally always feel bad whenever I have to do those, even if it's something that I've seen the long term benefits and everybody benefited. I still temporarily always feel bad. But I do feel that it's an important mark of leadership, and it's something that I didn't learn that as early as I should have. And I think it's something that, basically I think that if you have a leader that knows the difference, and a leader that can do both, then I think that that's the most effective leader.
I think, and I also think it's contextual, in a kind of group that's just composers getting together to do things. Ultimately, if any one person tries to, in any way, be the person who has to make that call, I think there's going to be problems. And if it's a formal organization, there's a difference. If you actually have a formal leadership position, which we've both been in that position, sometimes you do have to make the call.
We both had the same position actually at different times.
Right.
Yeah.
But
you're welcome for those decisions.
But if you're not in a formal leadership position and you try to take on that role, I think the group might survive, but it's not going to survive as a collaborative group.
Right.
And
basically you're saying kind of feel out the group, and if there's collaboration, which ideally there should be, if there's collaborative environment, if there's people that are more, go-getters, then I think that yes, it should be that way. But you do unfortunately sometimes end up, because we've had colleagues in the past that I'll just say they're more followers than, hey, I'm gonna go take charge. And occasionally you do end up with a group of those that's just like, you kind of gotta do something about it. But I think that it is entirely contextual.
Let me put it this way: if it was me in that position, if I was forced into a position in this kind of group where I had to make all the decisions, I don't know that I want to be in that group anymore, because at that point I'm not getting everything I can out of it.
Because you're having to put in 80%, whereas the other 3 people only put in 20 combined.
And also, I see that as ethically problematic, because if you're somebody without a formal leadership position trying to impose your will on other people, you reach the point where maybe you get pushback from people who, and the argument there is, well, you haven't tried to make any decisions, so I had to. But there's also can be legitimate concern that if you are making the decisions, what's the point of me being in this group anymore? So it's a two-way street.
I agree. It's you guys let us know. It is a little bit of give and a little bit of take, and I think it's entirely contextual. But I think that there are situations where it should be kind of more, I'll just call it the council environment, just because I'm an MMO person. I think there's time for I think there's times for the council environment, and there's also situations that call for more the not really a dictator, but more just the decision man type thing. And I think that's important to, no matter what kind of group you're in, figure out what the group needs, and if it's something that you're either not willing or not able to do, then get out. And that might sound harsh, but I mean, like, for instance, if you are someone that you want someone over you to tell you what to do because you just don't want to make the decisions, but you enter a group that is entirely collaborative, probably not the environment for you, unfortunately, because then you're going to slowly get ostracized from the rest. But I don't know, just you guys let us know. I mean, it's an interesting topic because it's a huge sliding scale with no set answers, I think. But all right, you want to bring up the last thing?
Well, and we only have a few minutes left, so this might be a bleed over kind of topic. But we can leave it up for listener feedback to lead us into next week if we decide to go in that direction. What I think that one of the questions we've been asking in our conversations with other people, is to what extent should composers be concerned about accessibility in their music? Is accessibility inherently desirable, or does our concern about accessibility depend on the piece and depend on the environment that we're composing in, or should it be kind of a blanket approach to composition that each of us take?
I think just like the last topic, there's no one answer, and there's not even just a couple of different answers, because accessibility it should always be somewhere in your brain, whether it's at the forefront, whether it's at the back. Just like, with the last one, there's different times for different situations. But in the case of accessibility, at least I personally feel that it really depends on the piece. You're going to slide it around based on the piece. Because, like, for instance, if I'm writing a piece for string orchestra, the most common environment for string orchestra is the high school environment.
Right.
Maybe undergraduate, but mostly the high school environment. Those are very popular. If I write something for string orchestra that is fairly inaccessible, considering the audience that normally sees the string orchestra concerts are, the parents and grandparents, not going to be terribly successful. But conversely, if I write something that's, really openly accessible for, let's just say, a college-level wind band, also not as successful. But because of the opposite reason, because if you go to a wind band concert, you expect it to have a little bit of, I'll just call it the grit.
The edge.
Yeah, the edge.
But although I would argue that wind band music, and this is a composer's perspective, so maybe not to a general audience, but tends to be on the accessible edge of what's going on.
I would agree. I was just comparing it to the string orchestra.
Well, and I think there's in that way a difference between you're maybe talking less about how accessible it is and more about how complex it is, because accessibility and complexity aren't the same thing. Whereas the string orchestra piece, especially for the people who are playing it, you can have
you can have a non-complex to play piece be completely inaccessible to the listener.
That's true, and like I said, they're not the same thing.
Yeah. I do agree that they're related, but they're not at all the same.
I don't think to me, I don't necessarily look at it that same way, because when I write, I don't think I'm concerned with the success of the piece. I'm concerned with the quality of the piece, and to me, I think there is a component of that approach that I take into my music. If somebody commissions a piece and they're expecting a specific thing, to me it's not very kind of me to give them something that.
Well, in some cases you won't get paid.
They just don't. If somebody will pay you.
Yeah, you won't get paid your money.
So. But if I'm just writing something, to me it all comes down to the material. If I want to write a string orchestra piece, and the material that the idea, you could say, or is the quote unquote inspiration part of the composition, if it leads me in a more academic or inaccessible direction, I'm not going to let that dissuade me from writing a string orchestra piece. I will be aware that it's not going to get performed by high schools, but
or possibly at all in
right.
that case.
But
and that's not talking about you. That's just
right.
talking string orchestras.
Right.
Like,
but you know, to me, I get into that in a minute. But to me, it has to depend on, essentially on the idea of the piece. I come at music from a philosophy that this is kind of counterintuitive, but at some level the piece writes itself.
what do you do?
but
just sit there.
Okay.
Yes, that's a wonderful G flat minor scale.
What I mean.
Oh,
you can have whatever constraints that you try to impose on the piece, but at some level you start with material, and what you do has to evolve out of that material. And if that material is conducive to a more accessible or a more crowd-friendly piece, then by all means I'm going to write that. If the material is more conducive to maybe a piece, it might not be, you know, impossible to understand. It may be just a little more difficult. Maybe it is not going to be as immediately pleasing to an audience. I'm not going to let that dissuade me from writing that piece, and I'm not going to try to force more accessibility into that music. I'm going to let my material guide me.
And I mean, I kind of agree with you, but I also, and maybe this is just because I've had, you know, more commissioned works, so my brain is just switching to this by default. See, it ruins you. Writing music for money ruins you. But I mean, a lot of times I am worried about accessibility, at least a little bit, and it might be because I've had more pieces that are requested. Hi, I want this piece that can be played at, you know, this high school orchestra event, etc. And it's like, I guess I just am thinking about that all the time now. But on the other side of things, I'm able to completely ignore it and write something like Polyphonate. So I mean,
I think that, to me, this is not a blanket rule, because there's plenty of good music that has been written for maybe less than completely art for art's sake purposes.
Right.
But to me, the ideal is art for art's sake, and it's one of the reasons I'm getting my master's. I want to eventually get my doctorate and go into academia, because I don't want to be dependent on commissions to make money, and to me, I personally, and you know, I to me this approach is the ideal approach. Everyone has their own approach, but I don't want to be as concerned with my success as a composer, commercially or with an audience, as I am about the quality of my music. It comes back to what I was saying earlier. It's to me, it's not about me. It's not about what people think of me, or you know, whether they like my music or not. It's about the music, and ultimately, and ultimately, that's what I have to contribute to the world. It's music, it's beauty, and if I write a piece that gets played a lot, but it's not as good as it could be, or I'm pandering, or I'm compromising, I'm not contributing what I should be contributing to the world. I think also, I mean, I think you do this too, from the conversations we have. I write for posterity, you know. I don't. Ultimately, none of us know if our music.
Two words: poker table.
Ultimately, none of us know if our music is going to be remembered. If you know, there's hundreds, thousands of composers in the world today. Only a few of us, and it may be me, it may be one of you listeners, will have our names featured in music history books. But I want to write as if that were the case. I want to write music that would stand the test of time as music, not just that people like in the here and now.
Well, I don't know. You guys, I mean, let us know. I mean, because I mean, again, I think both of our big topics. I mean, accessibility and composer concerts, collectives, etc. I mean, I think I think it's all just one giant sliding scale, and it really depends on the situation. Accessibility wise. Obviously, if you're writing for a high school string orchestra concert, you're going to write way differently than if you're writing for, the College Music Society conference.
Well, and to me, if I get commissioned to write something accessible, I will come at it with an idea that is more accessible. That's just my approach.
Well,
yes.
Again, let us know on that. Let us know on, the thoughts on, leadership roles in kind of composer concerts and all that kind of stuff, and even just composer concerts in general. And we've got a couple things that we'll get to next week that are kind of related. So, yeah. Anyways, this has been Composer Talk Week 2.
Yes.
Yeah. Next week will be Week 3.
And you know what they say about third times? It's a charm.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something much more prolific. Than
I was not going to say anything really anymore.
I thought you were gonna say something much more. I was about to say, man, we're gonna run long. This is gonna be great.
No.
Okay.
Just the common sense. But
well,
anyway,
sorry for the letdown at the end.
Bye, and we will see you next week for Composer Talk, installment number 3.
And next time, I won't be eating pizza for half the time.
He says that now.